Sherry is a fortified wine made from white grapes that are grown near the town of Jerez de la Frontera in Andalusia, Spain. Sherry is produced in a variety of styles made primarily from the Palomino grape, ranging from light versions similar to white table wines, such as Manzanilla and Fino, to darker and heavier versions that have been allowed to oxidize as they age in barrel, such as Amontillado and Oloroso.Sweet. Dessert wines are also made from Pedro Ximenez and Moscatel grapes, and are sometimes blended with Palomino-based Sherries. The word sherry is an anglicisation of Xeres. Sherry was previously known as sac, from the Spanish saca, meaning extraction, from the solera. In Europe, sherry has protected designation of origin status, and under Spanish law, all wine labeled as sherry must legally come from the Sherry Triangle, an area in the province of Cádiz between Jerez de la Frontera, San Luque de Barrameda, and El Puerto de Santa Maria. In 1933, the Jerez denomination de Oregon was the first Spanish denomination to be officially recognized in this way, officially named D.O. Jerez Xeres Sherry and sharing the same governing council as D.O. Manzanilla San Luque de Barrameda. After fermentation is complete, the base wines are fortified with grape spirit in order to increase the final alcohol content. Wines classified as suitable for aging as Fino and Manzanilla are fortified until they reach a total alcohol content of 15.5% by volume. As they age in barrel, they develop a layer of flor, a yeast-like growth that helps protect the wine from excessive oxidation. Those wines that are classified to undergo aging as Oloroso are fortified to reach an alcohol content of at least 17%. They do not develop flor and so oxidize slightly as they age, giving them a darker color. Because the fortification takes place after fermentation, most sherries are initially dry, with any sweetness being added later. In contrast, port wine is fortified halfway through its fermentation, which stops the process so that not all of the sugar is turned into alcohol. Wines from different years are aged and blended using a solera system before bottling, so that bottles of sherry will not usually carry a specific vintage year and can contain a small proportion of very old wine. Sherry is regarded by many wine writers as underappreciated and a neglected wine treasure. History. Jerez has been a center of viniculture since winemaking was introduced to Spain by the Phoenicians in 1100 BC. The practice was carried on by the Romans when they took control of Iberia around 200 BC. The Moors conquered the region in AD 711 and introduced distillation, which led to the development of brandy and fortified wine. During the Moorish period, the town was called Xeres, from which both sherry and Jerez are derived. Wines similar in style to sherry have traditionally been made in the city of Shiraz in mid-southern Iran, but it is thought unlikely that the name derives from there. Wine production continued through 5 centuries of Arab Empire's rule. In 966, Al-Hakam II, the second caliph of Córdoba, ordered the destruction of the vineyards, but the inhabitants of Jerez appealed on the grounds that the vineyards also produced raisins to feed the empire's soldiers, and the caliph spared 2/3 of the vineyards. In 1264, Alfonso X of Castile took the city. From this point on, the production of sherry and its export throughout Europe increased significantly. By the end of the 16th century, sherry had a reputation in Europe as the world's finest wine. Christopher Columbus brought sherry on his voyage to the New World, and when Ferdinand Magellan prepared to sail around the world in 1519, he spent more on sherry than on weapons. Sherry became very popular in Great Britain, especially after Francis Drake sacked Cadiz in 1587. At the time Cadiz was one of the most important Spanish seaports, and Spain was preparing an armada to invade England. Among the spoils Drake brought back after destroying the fleet were 2,900 barrels of sherry that had been waiting to be loaded aboard Spanish ships. This helped to popularize sherry in the British Isles, because sherry was a major wine export to the United Kingdom. Many English companies and styles developed. Many of the Jerez cellars were founded by British families. In 1894 the Jerez region was devastated by the insect phylloxera, whereas larger vineyards were replanted with resistant vines. Most smaller producers were unable to fight the infestation and abandoned the vineyards entirely. Types Fino is the driest and palest of the traditional varieties of sherry. The wine is aged in barrels under a cap of floor yeast to prevent contact with the air. Manzanilla is an especially light variety of Fino sherry made around the port of San Luca de Barrameda. Manzanilla passada is a Manzanilla that has undergone extended aging and has been partially oxidized, giving a richer, nuttier flavor. Amontillado is a variety of sherry that is first aged under floor but which is then exposed to oxygen, producing a sherry that is darker than a Fino but lighter than an Oloroso. Naturally dry, they are sometimes sold lightly to medium sweetened, but these can no longer be labeled as Amontillado. Oloroso is a variety of sherry aged oxidatively for a longer time than a Fino or Amontillado, producing a darker and richer wine. With alcohol levels between 18 and 20%, Olorosos are the most alcoholic sherries. Like Amontillado, naturally dry, they are often also sold in sweetened versions called cream sherry. As with Amontillado, sweet Oloroso, rich Oloroso, and Oloroso Dolce are prohibited terms. Palo Cortado is a variety of sherry that is initially aged like an Amontillado, typically for 3 or 4 years, but which subsequently develops a character closer to an Oloroso. This either happens by accident when the floor dies, or commonly the floor is killed by fortification or filtration. Jerez Dulce are made either by fermenting dried Pedro Ximenez or Moscatel grapes, which produces an intensely sweet dark brown or black wine, or by blending sweeter wines or grape must with a drier variety. Cream is a type of sweet sherry first made in the 1860s by blending different sherries, usually including Oloroso and Pedro Ximenez. On the 12th of April 2012, the rules applicable to the sweet and fortified denominations of Oregon Montilla Moriles and Jerez Xeres sherry were changed to prohibit sweet Oloroso and sweet Amontillado, banning terms such as rich Oloroso, sweet Oloroso, and Oloroso Dolce. Such wines are to be labeled as cream sherry, blend of Oloroso, Amontillado, or such like. The classification by sweetness is the protection of sherry. Spanish producers have registered the names Jerez Xeres sherry and will prosecute producers of similar fortified wines from other places using the same name. In 1933, Article 34 of the Spanish Estatuto del Vino established the boundaries of sherry production as the first Spanish wine denomination. Today, sherry's official status is further recognized by wider EU legislation. Sherry must come from the triangular area of the province of Cadiz between Jerez de la Frontera, San Luca de Barrameda, and El Puerto de Santa Maria. However, the name sherry is used as a semi-generic in the United States, where it must be labeled with a region of origin such as American sherry or California sherry. However, such wines cannot be exported to the EU. Australian winemakers now use the term apera instead of sherry, whilst Australian consumers still use the term sherry. As of December 31, 2013, the term apera is now also used by Canadian winemakers. Production. Climate. The Jerez district has a predictable climate, with approximately 70 days of rainfall and almost 300 days of sun per year. The rain mostly falls between the months of October and May, averaging 600 L per square meter. The summer is dry and hot with temperatures as high as 40 degrees Celsius, but winds from the ocean bring moisture to the vineyards in the early morning, and the clays in the soil retain water below the surface. The average temperature across the year is approximately 18 degrees Celsius. Soil: there are 3 types of soil in the Jerez district for growing the grapes for sherry. Albariza, the lightest soil, almost white, and best for growing Palomino grapes. It is approximately 40 to 50% chalk, the rest being a blend of limestone, clay and sand. Albariza preserves moisture well during the hot summer months. Barros, a dark brown soil, 10% chalk with a high clay content. Arenas, a yellowish soil, also 10% chalk but with a high sand content. The Albariza soil is the best for growing the Palomino grape, and by law 40% of the grapes making up a sherry must come from Albariza soil. The Barros and Arenas soil are mostly used for Pedro Ximenez and Moscatel grapes. The benefits of the Albariza soil is that it can reflect sunlight back up to the vine, aiding it in photosynthesis. The nature of the soil is very absorbent and compact so that it can retain and maximize the use of the little rainfall that the Jerez region receives. Grapes. Before the phylloxera infestation in 1894, there were estimated to be over 100 varieties of grape used in Spain for the production of sherry, but now there are only 3 white grapes grown for sherry making. Palomino, the dominant grape used for the dry sherries. Approximately 90% of the grapes grown for sherry are Palomino. As varietal table wine, the Palomino grape produces a wine of very bland and neutral characteristics. This neutrality is actually what makes Palomino an ideal grape because it is easily enhanced by the sherry winemaking style. Pedro Ximenez used to produce sweet wines. When harvested, these grapes are typically dried in the sun for 2 days to concentrate the sugars. Moscatel, used similarly to Pedro Ximenez, but it is less common. Sherry-style wines made in other countries often use other grape varieties. Fermentation: the Palomino grapes are harvested in early September and pressed lightly to extract the must. The must from the first pressing, the Primera Llama, is used to produce Fino and Manzanilla, and the mousse from the second pressing, the Segunda Llama, will be used for Oloroso. The product of additional pressings is used for lesser wines, distillation and vinegar. The must is then fermented in stainless steel vats until the end of November, producing a dry white wine with 11–12% alcohol content. Previously, the fermentation and initial aging was done in wood. Now it is almost exclusively done in stainless steel, with the exception of 1 or 2 high-end wines. Fortification: immediately after fermentation, the wine is sampled and the first classification is performed. The casks are marked with the following symbols according to the potential of the wine. The sherry is fortified using destilado, made by distilling wine, usually from La Mancha. The distilled spirit is first mixed with mature sherry to make a 50/50th blend known as mitad y mitad, and then the mitad y mitad is mixed with the younger sherry to the proper proportions. This 2-stage procedure is performed so the strong alcohol will not shock the young sherry and spoil it. Aging: the fortified wine is stored in 500-liter casks that are made of North American oak, which is less porous than French or Spanish oak. The casks, or butts, are filled 5/6 full, leaving the space of 2 fists empty at the top to allow a floor to develop on top of the wine. Sherry is then aged in the Solera system, where new wine is put into wine barrels at the beginning of a series of 3 to 9 barrels. Periodically, a portion of the wine in a barrel is moved into the next barrel down, using tools called the canoa and rociador to move the wine wine gently and avoid damaging the layer of floor in each barrel. At the end of the series, only a portion of the final barrel is bottled and sold. Depending on the type of wine, the portion moved may be between 5 and 30% of each barrel. This process is called running the scales because each barrel in the series is called a scale. Thus, the age of the youngest wine going in the bottle is determined by the number of barrels in the series, and every bottle also contains some much older wine than is stated. Sherry is aged in the Solera for a minimum of 3 years. A large Solera system may consist of scales that require more than one barrel to hold. The word Solera means on the ground. This refers to the stacking system that was, and sometimes still is, used, with the youngest barrels at the top and the older scale, also somewhat ambiguously called the Solera, at the bottom. Of late, sherry producers and marketers have been bottling the wines en rama with only a light filtration, and often a selection of a favored barrel from a larger Solera. Such sherries can be considerably more complex in flavor than the standard bottlings, and, according to many, are worth seeking out, in order to allow the sale of reliable average-age dated sherries. The Regulating Council has set up a system that accurately tracks the average age of the wines as they move through the Solera. 2 average-age dated categories are recognized: VOS and VORS. Old sherry butts are sold to the Scotch whisky industry for use in aging whisky. Other spirits and beverages may also be aged in used sherry butts. Storing and drinking. Once bottled, sherry does not generally benefit from further aging and may be consumed immediately, though the sherries that have been aged oxidatively may be stored for years without noticeable loss in flavor. Bottles should be stored upright to minimize the wine's exposed surface area. As with other wines, sherry should be stored in a cool, dark place. The best Fino sherries, which have been aged for longer than normal prior to bottling, such as Manzanilla passada, will continue to develop in the bottle for some years. Fino and Manzanilla are the most fragile types of sherry and should usually be drunk soon after opening, in the same way as unfortified wines. In Spain, Finos are often sold in half bottles, with any remaining wine being thrown out if it is not drunk the same day it is opened. Amontillados and Olorosos will keep for longer, while sweeter versions such as PX and blended cream sherries are able to last several weeks or even months after opening, since the sugar content acts as a preservative. Sherry is traditionally drunk from a copita traditionally made of silver and fastened to a long whale whisker handle. The cup, narrow enough to pass through the bunghole, withdraws a measure of sherry which is then ceremoniously poured from head height into a copita held in the other hand. Various types are often mixed with lemonade. This long drink is now called rebefito. Its typically ice-free equivalent in the Victorian age was the sherry cobbler. In popular culture, there are many literary figures who wrote about sherry: William Shakespeare, Benito Pérez Galdós, and Edgar Allan Poe. Famous Indian cricketer and politician Navjot Singh Sidhu, whose nickname is Sherry, named so by his father. Frasier and Niles Crane frequently consumed sherry on the TV sitcom Frasier. Sherry, and Amontillado specifically, was heavily featured in Season 3, Episode 10 of Monty Python's Flying Circus. In Arrietty, bottles of wine can be seen in Aunt Jessica's pantry. When Hara cries out that she's found the little people, Aunt Jessica asks her, "Are you sure you didn't find the sherry again?" In the Disney film adaptation of Mary Poppins, when he returns home from work, Mr. Banks states in the song "The Life I Lead" that his slippers, sherry, and pipe are due at 6:02. In the Tales of the City series of books, one of the main characters, Anna Madrigal, often offers sherry to her house guests. Related products: brandy de Jerez, sherry vinegar.